Kamiak Butte gives evidence of the quartzite base that lies beneath the broad basalt floods of the Palouse. Because basalt does not come from explosive volcanic activity, but rather slowly floods an area, the basalt flows were not deep enough to completely engulf all of the quartzite of the region. Evidence of massive flooding is seen in the way that river beds are cut in the area. Preglacial rivers more than likely flowed at a similar depth and flow as they currently do, but large areas of mass erosion show a story of massive rivers stripping the land of everything, down to and into the basalt layer. Once the glaciers were gone, the rivers and streams returned to their normal flow levels, leaving behind only erosion and seemingly out of place rocks. The plant matter in soil that was washed away was redeposited by the area's persistent easterly winds. This is what makes the Palouse such popular farmland and lends to the fertility of the butte. The fascinating microclimates that are found on Kamiak Butte are created by the unusual climate of the Palouse itself, in combination with the happenstance of the geological positioning of the butte. Many of the geological formations of the area have a similar directional quality, but as the highest peak in the area, the environmental effects of this positioning is most strongly felt. One can see the northern slopes of the hills in the area all retaining snowbanks after the remainder of snow elsewhere on the landscape is already melted. This is because, especially in the winter, the northern slope of the hill remains largely shadowed by the southern aspect, protecting it from the most harmful of the sun's rays. This slows the snow melt, extending the amount of time that the precipitation is distributed over the area. The shielding of the sun's rays also allows for more vegetative growth over the area, which further assists the moisture retention of the soil. This directly affects the ability for the area to support such large amounts of plant growth, including the specific species that are growing on the northern aspect but not found on the south. The south aspect of the butte receives the harshest of the sun's rays, and because of that, the moisture availability is much lower than on the north. However, there are still a number of primary growth species that are able to use the small amount of water availability and withstand the sun's intensity. The only tree species that's able to survive here is the ponderosa pine, as its roots run deep, though here its dispersal is clearly very restricted. Serviceberry grows in relative abundance, and snowberry in small, widely dispersed patches. Between the trees and shrub grow grasses like wheatgrass, fescue, and other annual grasses. The average canopy cover on the north aspect of the butte is 60%. This, coupled with the protection this side of the butte receives from the southern aspect, means that this part of the butte is partially exposed to mostly indirect light. The southern-facing side of the prominence, with its 15% grade and 1% canopy cover, however, has essentially full exposure. The north side of the butte is rich with organisms of primary production. The canopy is made of ponderosa pine, western larch, and Douglas fir. These species are distributed throughout the entirety of the northern aspect. The understory is comprised of well-dispersed mallow ninebark, restricted snowberry, and patchy wood rose. Mosses and lichen are an often overlooked plant group, though they're very important to many ecosystems, including Kamiak. While lichen appear to be a single organism, they're known to be two, in a mutualistic relationship, a fungus and a photosynthetic bacterium. Though this is the most well-known understanding of the relationship, some argue that instead the fungus is acting more as a parasite, holding the photoreceptive bacteria captive and using it as a food source. One well-known function of lichen is to break down rock. Like moss, lichen are often pioneer species in a primary succession event. Because of the fungus photosynthetic bacteria relationship, the lichen is more tolerant of drought conditions and is even able to grow on the south side of the slope, unlike moss. Beyond these functions, lichen are also important to the nutrient cycling in an environment. Studies have found that in some areas, lichen can contribute to as much as a quarter of the total biomass turnover in an ecosystem per year. The largest nutrient cycled is nitrogen, more nitrogen in fact than any leaf litter. Lichens in the lower portion of the canopy leach these nutrients more readily than those in the upper canopy, mostly because those in the lower canopy have more stored nutrients to leach due to nutrients leaching into them from the upper canopy surfaces. Moss is a non-vascular plant that requires a lot of moisture. This is why it's found on the northern aspect and not found on the southern aspect at all. While it can be quite drought resistant, the southern aspect of the hill is far too hot and dry of a climate. The northern slope, however, has moss in abundance. Especially as one nears the top of the northern aspect, the slope of the hill suddenly becomes negligible. That is, becomes a large rock wall. This area is prime territory for mosses, and they grow in great abundance and diversity here. These mosses will eventually break down this quartzite wall and create soils for other plants to grow, but this is of course a very long-term process. Mosses play an important role in several ecosystem processes that play out over centuries. Permafrost formation and thaw, peat accumulation, development of microtopography, and there is a need for studies that increase our understanding of slow, long-term dynamical processes. Mosses are known to increase the carbon accumulations in soil, and studies have shown that their disturbance reduces the carbon storage in the soil of a given area. Mosses even help with seedling growth due to their shallow associations with mycorrhiza. Furthermore, mosses also have been shown to have an effect on the abundance and diversity of the organisms in the soil as well.